Assalamu alaikum. We have been joined today again on the podcast by Dr. Sami Al Aryan. You all are fully aware of him. Sheikh, welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here for the third time today. We've been losing the internet connection back to back, but inshallah, we will go through with this. Sheikh, this is the issue on hand. The Pakistani citizenry is very fascinated by the situation in Iran, obviously, because they're our neighbor, and we've been witnessing for the past 10 years the activities of the so called axis of resistance in Lebanon and Syria and Iraq. And now we've seen a sort of a pseudo conflict on mainland Iran with Israel. What do we make of all of this? I know it's a lot to unpack, but the floor is yours.
Well, I think to understand Iran, we have to go to the beginning of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Iran today is just a product of 46 years of the Islamic Revolution. This is not something that just happened today. In 1979, the Iranian people had a revolution that was led by a cleric, Imam Khomeini, in which he had certain understanding of the history and certain conception of what the future of Iran should be. It was a popular revolution. There was a constitution in which 98% of the people voted for it. And then an Islamic system, an Islamic paradigm was in place. We're talking about a government in which the wali al-faqih, the cleric, is going to be in charge of the situation. And then there are many institutions that were built in order to have checks and balance within the system. This particular setup, political structure, has been in place now for over 4 decades. It's very important to understand the nature of this, that this is not, as some in the West or probably even in the East would try to portray it, as the rule of the clerics or of one man show. This is a system that was well thought of, that was voted on, and it has been working, whether people like it or not, for over 4 decades. It has many institutions. Certainly, the wali al-faqih, or the person in charge, must have certain qualifications for that person to assume his duties. And in this situation, it's not too far from the concept of the Khilafat in the Sunni history, in the Sunni sect of Islam. In fact, many people believe that what Khomeini did, he borrowed the concept of the Khilafat, because the concept of Imamat is different in the Shia theology than what they are practicing today. And actually, some people think that this is could be an improvement as people would see it, or could be a different conception, because since the Mahdi is not in place, and therefore they should not have any kind of Islamic cleric until he's back. At any rate, that system was set up, and in that system, Iran had certain revolutionary values that they were trying to uphold. Among these revolutionary values are the total independence, because of their experience in the 1950s, when Mossadegh was the prime minister and he was trying to nationalize oil and the oil company, and then the Americans, in collusion with the British, they plotted against the elected government at the time, and they were able to throw it away and bring back the Shah. And during the Shah reign, there was all kinds of excesses, including torture by the Savak and so on and so forth. This revolution came, and it raised the motto or the slogan, "No East nor West," not part of the East or the West, that this is an Islamic revolution. And of course, an Islamic revolution, we might add, from a Shia theology, which differs in certain aspects with the Sunni, but at the heart of it is the Islamic spirit. But soon after they took power, the regional governments, the regional states, did not like the fact that this is an Islamic revolution. It might affect actually their populations, as well as it might, if people see it as a successful experiment where Islam was the impetus, Islam was the spirit behind such change in government, and therefore they started to isolate this, distort it. But more importantly, they started a war by giving Saddam the green light, not only by the West, but by regional states. And there was a very brutal 8-year war between Iraq and Iran. This war actually is if people do not understand the impact of this war on Iran and the Iranians, then they cannot understand many of the policies that Iran has adopted since that time. This was a very difficult, very brutal war, 8 years, hundreds of thousands of their citizens died. Initially, they lost a lot of land. Eventually, they gained that land. They tried to punish Saddam Hussein by trying to overthrow him. They failed to do that. And after 8 years, they had to accept, as Khomeini at the time says, like taking a poison, they had to accept a truce with no winner in that war. But Iran benefited from the fact that it knew that the whole world would not support it, that many people across the world would like to end their government, they would like to isolate them, would like to change, have a regime change. And of course, one of the most important principles of this revolution was its pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli policies. This is incontestable. Iran was, throughout these years, the only country, perhaps among many Muslim countries, that always said it's not going to recognize Israel, regardless what the Palestinians do. It is the only country that publicly support the Palestinian resistance, even the military wing of the Palestinian resistance. No other country in the world publicly or even privately support the resistance in military ways. It has supported them financially, militarily, weapon size, training, and so on and so forth. So it is unique from that standpoint. But that is not just rhetoric. This actually has been a policy that went beyond the Palestinians. When the Israelis invaded Lebanon in 1982, it was very clear what the Israelis want to do is to have a peace treaty with once the Palestinians were expelled from Lebanon, to have a peace treaty with a compliant Lebanese government, and then try to have some sort of a relationship by which it can dictate to that Lebanese government, since it will be weak, what Israel wanted, including perhaps even to have as a zone of influence, not only throughout Lebanon, but particularly up to the Litani River, because it occupied it during that time. At any rate, Iran started a resistance movement in Lebanon, in which it supplied it with billions of dollars of training and of all kinds of assistance. It became known as Hezbollah, which over an 18-year period between 82 and 2000 was able to bloody the existence and presence of the Israelis, the Israeli army in South Lebanon, and it had to, in which Israel had at the end to withdraw. And of course, that was considered a great triumph by the resistance, the Lebanese resistance. And by building this army of tens of thousands of people, of a very formidable force, the stature of Iran also increased throughout the region.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। लोग बार बार एक सवाल पूछते हैं कि कौन सी बुक्स मैं शौक से पढ़ता हूँ, तो हमने ये सोचा कि इंशाल्लाह हम एक बुक क्लब बना लें जिसके अंदर माहवार हम एक किताब को कवर करें, और ये मंथली 4 क्लासेस बनेंगी इंशाल्लाह। इसके अंदर हम 12 किताबें एक साल के अंदर कवर करेंगे। एक लिस्ट है बुक्स की, मैं आपको यहाँ डिस्प्ले कर देता हूँ, और ये टेंटेटिव लिस्ट है। इसमें मैंने कुछ इकोनॉमिक्स की किताबें रखी है, कुछ पॉलिटिकल साइंस की, और कुछ थोड़ी जो नॉटी गवर्नमेंट्स की जो मिसगिविंग्स होती हैं और उनके ऊपर जो इन्वेस्टिगेटिव जर्नलिस्ट ने काम किया हुआ है। हमारी क्लासेस जो होंगी वो एंटरटेनिंग होंगी, फन होंगी, लेकिन سبجیکٹ میٹر جو ہے سیریس ہوگا. میں ریکمینڈ کروں گا کہ آپ فزیکلی جوائن کریں. لیکن اگر آپ کو فزیکلی جوائن کرنے میں دقت آتی ہے, آپ پاکستان میں نہیں ہیں, آپ لاہور میں نہیں ہیں, تو ان کے لیے پھر زوم کی آپشن اویلیبل ہے اور ان کو ایکولی ایز مچ ایکسیس ملے گا بک کلب کا. ان کی ہم ایک سیپریٹ واٹس ایپ کمیونٹی بھی بنا دیں گے آپ کی, تاکہ ہم وہاں پہ نوٹس بھی شیئر کر پائیں اور ان بکس کو تفصیل میں ڈسکس کر کے ہوپ فلی وی میک فرینڈز ایز ویل انشاءاللہ. تو اس کی فیس جو مقرر ہے آپ ویب سائٹ پہ دیکھ سکتے ہیں, یہاں پہ آپ کو لنک مل جائے گا. تو آئی ہوپ ٹو سی یو دیئر ایٹ دا بک کلب انشاءاللہ. سی یو سون.
We have to understand that Iraq could not have waged this war without the active support of the Arab regimes. Tens of billions of dollars were given to Iraq in order to wage this war, including, of course, arms that came to Iraq from different countries around the world, particularly Russia and others, as well as intelligence services by the West, in order to make sure that Iran would be isolated in an attempt for regime change. That failed, of course. But Iran took a lesson, a hard lesson, that it needs to engage the Arab world. It needs to have some sort of what they call a forward defense. This is a term that the Iranian expert, Wali Nasser, who is an international relations expert, lives in the United States, wrote in a book, The Grand Strategy of Iran, in which Iran had to basically build proxies or build allies around so that she doesn't have to fight on its own soil. And therefore, in addition to the issue of Palestine and confronting Israel, since Israel from day one showed that it will be very hostile to this regime, Israel cannot live with regimes that are independent, with regimes that would like to assert sovereignty, with regimes that would be popular to the point that they would be willing to help the Palestinians to overcome the oppression and the occupation and the invasion of Israelis over the Palestinians. So Israel took a very hostile attitude to the Islamic Revolution. People would bring in some episodes here and there. These are not very strategic things, what happened during the Iran-Contra and this and that. These were tactical things, cannot be used as proof of anything, because we have seen throughout the decades what the Israelis wanted to do to Iran and what Iran wanted to do to Israel. These are policies, strategic positions that have been taken. The United States, again, for its own reasons, as well as for its support of Israel, has been conspiring against the Islamic Revolution in Iran, against the Iranian state. We've seen there are hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent in order to topple the regime. So that happened throughout the period. Of course, there were episodes by which they aligned, their goals were aligned. For example, when the United States wanted to topple Saddam Hussein because of a different imperative at the time, in which Israel did not want to see Saddam Hussein in power, and it wanted to overthrow him. And the same thing goes for Iran, because it suffered from Iran's aggression, from Saddam's aggression. And therefore, their goals were coincided. But of course, the United States did not want to have a bargain with Iran, and therefore Iran worked very hard with its allies in Iraq, again, to kick out or to expel the U.S. From the Middle East. And of course, it did not succeed fully, because the United States also has many allies in the region. The bottom line here is this. We have an Iranian regime, and when I say an Iranian regime, it doesn't mean that every Iranian agrees with it, and it doesn't mean even those who support the revolution necessarily support the Iranian policy. What it means is that the current government in Iran that has been empowered in Iran, in which the Revolutionary Guard are very important part of this government, they have a commitment to Palestine. You may have in the future another supreme leader and another government of Iran that could also claim to be supporter of the revolution, but they're not as supportive of the Palestinian issue as they are. That position and the position of trying to eradicate or to end foreign influence in the region, particularly the Americans and Western, is what defines the Iranian policy in the region. At the same time, they're not willing to engage in protracted wars, having to go through an 8-year war with Iraq until they are ready. And because they have been under extreme sanctions for much of these 45 or 46 years, they understand also that they cannot engage in wars unprepared. So they have been trying to prepare for the time in which they are powerful enough to withstand the pressure that's coming their way because of their ideology and because of their policies and because of their stands on different issues. So they have, throughout the years, were able to use their ingenuity and their sacrifices to build a formidable and militarily formidable government and system, and they didn't want to use it because they always thought it's not time yet. In the meantime, they were also empowering their allies in the region. Over the years, they were able to build a base in Lebanon with their support of the Palestinian resistance, a very strong supporters, particularly in Gaza, in terms of their support to Hamas and Jihad. And also because of their influence in Iraq, they were able to empower militias inside Iraq that they could be used when needed, particularly with the presence of America in the region. And also for that to work, they needed to be on friendly terms with the Syrian regime. It's not about sectarianism as some people would like to use it. Their support of the Assad regime was based on very hard geopolitical calculations, in which for them to have a strong presence in Lebanon, they needed a supporter, an ally in Syria. And most of the people who were, and no one can dictate to the Syrians how they want to, which government they need to have. But their calculation was that this revolution was not going to be successful, and that most of the people leading it or influencing it are people allied with their enemies, whether it was the United States or the regional enemies or Israel. And therefore, they made a decision to support the Assad regime in order to keep that forward defense.
Don't you think, Sheikh, that was a strategic mistake? Because it seems that the whole axis of resistance that they built, it sort of collapsed in on itself because of Syria. Don't you think they put all their eggs in one basket with the Assad regime and it all came tumbling down? Was that a miscalculation from a strategic standpoint? Was there no other option for Iran to have better ties with the revolutionaries or with the potential new Syria that might have come out? And by involving Russia and by involving Hezbollah and the Zainabiyun and Fatimiyun, they have not only lost a lot of clout and political capital that they enjoyed in the Sunni world, but they've also crippled Hezbollah. And they've burnt through a lot of their assets in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where they were getting a lot of recruits for Zainabiyun and Fatimiyun, all of the recruits actually. Like, do you think it was a strategic mistake, or is it in hindsight that we have the luxury of critiquing this policy? Was there no other option at the time?
Whether it was a strategic mistake or not, people have to go back and look at the options available to decision makers. Right now, if the Syrian regime, I don't think people can make a decision based on what happened in the past, but also what's happening right now. It's not clear to me that the current Syrian regime is a regime that would be anti-West or anti-Israel. And if you go back to when Hezbollah entered the war, and when Iran entered the war, and when the Russians entered the war, many of the revolutionary groups, unfortunately, have also had foreign influence. So if you are a decision maker and you have two principles, one principle, you would like to be with the people. You want the people to live in a free society. You don't want tyranny or oppression or authoritarianism or despotism to be in charge. And the other is you would like to have a regime that is friendly and would be anti-Israel. And when these two principles clash, it would be a decision that you have to make. So if you have to make a decision between having to support a future regime that could undermine your plans for a axis of resistance, or you could have a regime that would be with you, then you probably would make a decision based on what's going on in terms of the presence, and that would have been to support Assad because Assad was the conduit. It's very difficult to say what would have happened in retrospect because you're not sure whether who among the regimes at the time foes would be the ones that would actually carry the day because there were so many hands in Syria, and I would not. I don't want to basically take a position where I say this is right or wrong. I only give descriptions, and I don't like to use rhetoric in which I consider this is a sectarian decision, because I do not believe it was a sectarian decision. I think it was based on geopolitical realities. Now, people certainly could make mistakes and could make wrong calculations. But the point here is this: if a regime is changing in Syria and it turns against the axis of resistance, regardless of what Israel does, this is going to be a huge price for Iran or the axis of resistance to pay. If a change in government in Syria comes by which the regime is going to be in sync with the axis of resistance or with the idea of resistance, certainly if you support a despotic regime, is something that could actually come back to haunt you. Now, we are in the midst of what happened here. And as I said, it's not clear to me whether the current regime is a regime that has, in its essence, taking a position to be anti-West or anti-foreign influence or anti-Israel. In fact, it is more on friendlier terms with the regimes which are pro-West, and there are a lot of talk in the West now, with everything going on, that they are willing to sign. Now, if that happens, that would be an absolute disaster for the Syrian state and for the Syrian people. There is another important element here to consider, which is the territorial integrity of Syria. I believe that there would have, at one point, a possible rapprochement between the different parts of Syrians that would keep the Syrian territorial integrity intact. Now, with the collapse of the Syrian society, I just hope that we don't get into the divisions and fragmentation, because this is what Israel wants to have. Israel wants Syria to be fragmented into four areas, four regions: Druze under its influence and occupation, a Sunni under the Turks, Alawite under the Russians, and Kurds under the Americans. And this is extremely dangerous, because that's what Israel's grand design for the region is try to fragment as many of the region's ethnic compositions as possible. And they don't even hide this. It's right in the open. They will try to see this as being implemented. They went after all the capabilities of the Syrian regime that the current regime is not even enjoying. Every military capability. They went after it and they destroyed it. And then they went and occupied even another 450 kilometers square in addition to the Golan Heights. And yet we haven't seen much from the current regime that would show that they care more about the integrity of the Syrian territory, and that what makes a lot of people apprehensive about what's going on, because some people are valuing the change in Syria, and I can't fault the Syrians for having to value freedom, but at the same time, the price should not be the sovereignty and independence and your territories. That would be a disaster.
No, but isn't the current regime wise enough to understand do they have any options to resist this territorial potential threat? Because even in any sort of agreement with Israel, Israel is not going to stop in its expansionary policy. And I'm sure the current regime is also fully aware of that. Do they have no recourse to this? Like you mentioned, that Israel's goal in the region is to create a sea of chaos and then to create small ethnic enclaves like itself, like a UAE, like a Tel Aviv, that these are bastions of civilization and in a sea of savages. That's the policy they're pursuing. This much is clear. But to the territorial integrity of Syria and sovereignty, is that not one of the goals for any regime, even from a cynical standpoint? So don't they have any recourse against Israel, considering they don't have the kind of military capability to stand against it?
Well, you have two approaches. You have the approach of Sadat, in which Sadat believed in 1977 that most of the cards are in the hands of the Americans, and therefore he wants to be on friendly terms with the Americans. He wants to accommodate as many of their demands as possible. And therefore, this was going to change the conditions in Egypt. I remember in 1979, in which he was saying that, we've suffered too much. We need to regroup and we need to build our economy and build our society. I remember the pound, the Egyptian pound at the time, $1 was worth 0.7 pounds. In other words, dollar and a half, or dollar and a third would be 1 pound. Today, the Egyptian pound, the $1 is 50 Egyptian pounds. So it deteriorated 70 times. These kind of attitudes, once you are in the grip of the imperialists and the Zionists, they want to make sure that you stay weak and fragmented and exhausted and unable to build your society, because they will consider that as an existential threat. You have the example of the Taliban. The Taliban were totally defeated in 2001, and they were given all kinds of opportunities, and they completely refused to surrender. They continued to fight. They continued to bloody their enemies and to have a war of attrition until the enemy, despite all its planes and power and missiles and bombs and nuclear capabilities and navy and army and marines and air force, they had to withdraw at the end. And now they are building their country based on independence and based on the model that they'd like to have. I do not believe that taking or thinking that you can accommodate the West so that you can build your country on their capitalist system, in which exploitation and that they will have your interest at heart. I think it's quite the opposite. I think it's the interest of Israel that will be accommodated. They will make sure they keep you weak. So I'm not sure what the current regime is thinking when they think that somehow by building their country or by taking a position of non-confrontation. I'm not saying they have to go and fight Israel. I'm not saying that. But at the same time, if they, at the end, give in to Israeli and American demands in terms of whatever Israel wants from them, and there's a lot of talk now that they want to be a part of the Abraham Accord. I don't know what that means. If you have part of your territory, 1,150 square kilometers occupied, in which it has been annexed, and the United States has recognized this, where does that take you? It's not clear. I mean, you haven't even been Yes, you have the revolutionary legitimacy because you toppled the regime, but that does not give you the right to basically abdicate your role in terms of keeping the integrity and the territorial integrity of your country. If Assad, the despotic and a brutal regime, did not give up and did not give in to these demands, how could the revolutionary do it? I mean, it's just beyond me. And I don't think they should be given a pass because they are weak that they can give in. If, on the other hand, they do not give in and they continue to build their country in a way that will keep their dignity and will keep their independence and will keep their revolutionary spirit and not give in to these demands, that's a different story. But what we're seeing today makes people very concerned. I am, for one, very concerned because I know what Trump and the U.S. policy towards the region is. I know what Netanyahu's policies are. I know what some regional countries have for such a situation, and therefore it makes me very concerned about the future of Syria.
See, Afghanistan had the luxury of terrain, and they had a border with Pakistan. They could find refuge in Pakistan, regroup. They had reinforcements, they had finances, training, and all these options. And then they fought this long war. Like you said, that there's two models. There's the Sadat model, and then there's the Taliban model, where you can resist your occupation, and then inevitably you can build your country up in the way you envision. Um,
But wait, there is another important point. When Jolani himself was in Idlib, people were telling him, this is a fruitless struggle. Why are you doing this? They are much stronger than they are. The regime is much stronger. He has the Russians, he has the Iranians, he has all these militias. His response was, no, I am on a just struggle. I'm not going to give in. My goal is very clear. Either I get freedom or I get martyrdom. What's changed? So the only change is the enemy. So when it is Israel, now we give all kinds of excuses. He didn't give an excuse for the Assad regime. He said, I'm going to fight until I gain my freedom. Why is this any different? I mean, the balance of power is the same. Why is it when the enemy is Assad, you give all kinds of responses that you are defiant, that you're going to fight till the end, to the bitter end, because you value freedom, you value independence. But when the enemy is Israel, you immediately give in and say they are much stronger than they are. Now I need to get some rest. Now I need to build my country. Do you think they will allow you to build your country? At the same time, you're going to liberate your country? Of course not. Whatever you build your country with, they're going to come and destroy it in no time if you start challenging them. That is just a hypocritical stand that doesn't make any sense.
So there's no option. That's what you're saying, that when you compared the Egyptian pound as well, that there is no option except to resist the Israeli dominance in the region and American imperial interests. But
And I'm not
does
saying
he?
I'm not saying you need to be crazy or madman or anything, but you have to take stands. And I know these are difficult stands, but these are the right stands because the alternative is horrific. For them to take a very strong stand against Iran, for example, but very malleable stand against Israel doesn't make sense. If you want to take a strong stand, then you take a strong stand against all your enemies.
Right. That's the situation in Syria. And what about the situation in Lebanon? There is a feeling in Pakistan, and it's being discussed, that Hezbollah and the Axis has been somewhat abandoned by Iran, and that this the Lebanese problem for Israel has been tamed. Yani the goal that they had in the 80s has been achieved. How valid do you think this is? Because Syria is weakened, they have this new regime, like you mentioned. It's a sort of wishy-washy when it comes to Israel. What is the situation in Lebanon, and then by extension in Iraq?
Well, before we analyze what's happening in Lebanon, people have to know what actually happened in Lebanon. Lebanon, Hezbollah became a formidable force, but it also did not realize that because of its victory by the lack, it was not defeated in 2006. Israel has focused on this battle for almost 20 years. They were preparing for this, and they were able to infiltrate the Lebanese society to the point where they are able to decapitate many of their soldiers and leaders. And that's going to take a huge impact on you, because it's going to take perhaps months and years to rebuild your strength. This is not something this was a very difficult situation in which your entire military leadership plus much of your political leadership have been targeted. This is not something that you can recover from easily. That has nothing to do with Iran abandoning you. In fact, Iran has been trying to help them. But with the fall of the regime in Syria, it became extremely difficult to do that, but not impossible. And despite all these setbacks, Hezbollah has not been defeated. It's been a formidable force. It hasn't surrendered. It hasn't raised the white flag. But you have to add to this another level of sophistication and challenge, which is that unlike Gaza and the Palestinian situation, the Lebanese are not united in their attitude towards Americans and the Israelis. So you have another battle internally that you have to fight, that your environment is not totally behind you, unlike what's happening in Gaza, for example. Of course, the Israelis are trying to change that situation in Gaza by building these fake and fictitious militias so that they can go after the resistance, but hasn't received any meaningful popular support. But in Lebanon, at best, you have perhaps 30 to 40% of the people with you, and that gives you a very difficult environment to work in. But I don't see any signs that Iran has abandoned Hezbollah. I believe Iran is under a very difficult situation. They have also suffered militarily from the Americans and the Israelis, but they were able to respond very strongly, to the point that towards the end of the 12-day war, it was the Israelis who were seeking ceasefire rather than the Iranians. The Iranians have the capacity to receive blows and to suffer, but the Israelis don't have that capacity. It was the Israelis who were suffering much more than the Iranians were ever suffering. So if I have to summarize the challenges and the setbacks of the axis of resistance, I think number one was the fall of the Syrian regime, and number two was the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. These are very serious setbacks. It will be years before they could be replaced. But the axis of resistance is still there. You can see what's happening in Yemen. I think Yemen is another example by which the Israelis have not been able to find an answer to. Maybe they would like to use the same tactics of genocide and massacres, but they haven't been able to because they have not focused on them, and they lack the intelligence needed to decapitate the leadership. But I believe we are in as the Israelis would like to say, an existential threat. But can the Israelis actually overcome the whole region? I mean, they are after all, 7, 8 million people? They're not even 8 million people, because you have about 2 million Arabs. So at best, they are 7 million. And they can't simply defeat hundreds of millions in the region. They can have an upper hand for a few years, few decades even, but that does not let them carry the day. They want to build a greater Israel. They would like to have a hegemony over the whole region. But I think this is a tall order. They are incapable. They lack the basic ingredients for a hegemonic power. If it wasn't for the United States and the West in general, aiding and abetting them in their genocidal war, they would not have been able to achieve anything. All what they are capable of is killing. And what do they kill? Mostly women and children and civilian structures. And despite this mayhem, this killing, this massacres, tens of thousands of killed, hundreds of thousands of injured, millions of displaced, they haven't been able to bring Hamas and the and the resistance to heal. I mean, so far, no one has surrendered. No one has risen a white flag. They're still incapable of freeing their captives from in an area that is 365 kilometers square, and they're still losing soldiers every single day. Are they capable of actually having a hegemony of the whole region? I don't think so. I think over time there will be strategic changes, and even strategic changes are taking place globally. The world is tired of Israeli conduct and Israeli behavior, and I don't think they can carry it on forever. Yes, they have the American political class today, in which they are supporting them with the war machines, with the weapons, and with the political support and cover, and financially, and so on and so forth. But that cannot continue forever again, because I think what we are facing over the long term is that there will be a global movement. By this global movement, people are going to rise up and reject this kind of politics. We are seeing the end of the World War II or post-World War II international order. That order at one point will be replaced with a new order, and that new order also will have political heft, will have political impact on what's going on, because now all these international institutions, their credibility has been undermined, and no one is taking them serious anymore. This whole regime that the United States has helped create and manage has collapsed. So what will replace it? I mean, this is all because of Zionism. Not only that, even their own internal structures and values have been undermined. Look at what's happening to universities, to students, to even people in regular jobs. Look at how the media has been transformed. There are so many changes that would eventually have an impact on societies and on the international order. And I think our societies also, our people, are not going to remain silent forever. I mean, they have seen the weakness and ineptitude of the Arab and Muslim regimes, and a lot of people don't like what they're seeing. I think eventually the youth will say enough is enough. We can't be that weak. We can't continue to be that weak, in which Israel, this pariah state, can do whatever it wants. Eventually, they will have to rise up and change the situation. So Israel, as Ben Gurion says, has to win every single battle. We only have to win once.
Right. That's a very profound statement. There's a build-up that's going on in Iraq right now. It's quite clear that the imperialist and Israel have their eyes on Iraq, on trying to dismantle the militias that are allied with Iran. And we saw, even after the 12-day sort of semi-pseudo sort of conflict, that Israel and America, who have been planning this for decades, like you said, they're not going to back off. And at least the suspicion in Pakistan is that it's going to keep ramping up the pressure against Iran. What do you see the situation with regards to the militias in Iraq and the mainland of Iran? Do you think that, I mean, we saw the statements by Armaghachi, we saw the statements by Pezeshkian. They still seem to be keeping a door open for Western negotiation. But it seems like the Western element of that negotiation is not willing to participate. Do you think that Iran is going to face further aggression and delve deeper into a conflict, or do you see a resolution here? And Iraq as well.
Let's be clear about what happened in Iran. What happened in Iran was not an assault and an attack on a country. It was an attempt for regime change, and it did not succeed at all. They were trying to decapitate the military and political leadership. Most of these attacks, they were trying to change the regime and weaken it. And they were hoping that there will be either an uprising or a military coup that will follow suit. They know now that they can't change the policy on the nuclear power or nuclear program of Iran without regime change. And all the things that happened, whether it was by Israel or the United States, do not change the fact that Iran has the knowledge and the capability and the capacity to restart or regroup or or having the nuclear program again. This is not something everybody agrees with that. It's just a matter of weeks or months. So what they're trying to do is regime change, and that failed miserably. And then on top of that, they discovered that Iran is a very, very strong country, powerful country. And despite the fact that Iran always gave them the signals and the proof that it is strong and it's capable of hurting them, but it does not seek a war, they ignored it. Back, when it happened last year, 2 times, when Iran responded, it was able to use some of its missile capability to penetrate their defenses and reach its target. But somehow they thought that this is a bluff, and Iran called their bluff. And we saw during these 12 days that Iran was capable of hurting the Zionists and the Zionist regime very, very heavily. It reached many of, and by the way, most of the targets that it hit were military targets, unlike what Israel and its allies within the country were trying to do, which is to hurt the whole country and collapse its economic and civilian structures. We saw, for example, that it was able to reach the defense ministry, some intelligence military bases, some intelligence facilities, as well as strategic facilities, and that it was able to shut down the whole country for 10 days. The airport was not functioning, the seaport was not functioning, all their industry was not functioning. Everybody was almost over half people were in shelters. Israel cannot sustain this. Just imagine, just for a second, that if Israel was faced with 3 or 4 or 5 different countries that were coming like Iran, and Iran was not sending tens of thousands of missiles. It was only a few dozens that it sent. Just imagine if this was the case, if Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or Iran or Iraq or Syria or Algeria, all of them were preparing. And it wouldn't take much to develop a missile. Israel would surrender and give up in no time because it can't take it. It's simply too small for it to withstand this. So what they are trying to do is to use American leverage over all these countries so it will be safe, but not only safe, but it will be the hegemon in the region. It was Israel at the end that was seeking a ceasefire. And they will continue to try to change regime because they know that at the end, they cannot accommodate a regime that totally rejects Zionist aggression and Zionist presence, because Zionism is not a national liberation movement. Zionism is a settler, colonial, aggressive, supremacist, racist movement that's trying to replace the Palestinians with Jews around the world. It's pure and simple. That's what it is. Its program is to replace the Palestinians. And the Iranians are not willing to stand up and agree to that. Unfortunately, most of the people around the world, including many in the Muslim world, are willing to sacrifice Palestinian rights because they do not want to recognize the fact that this is a menace that's going to impact them and affect them. And therefore, they tag along this fake idea that there will be a two-state solution. Well, everybody knows that there is no two-state solution. Israel is not even willing to entertain this. They have changed the facts on the ground where there's no two-state solution. When Netanyahu stood before the United Nations on 22nd September 2023, 15 days before Tufan al-Aqsa, he had a map in his hand drawing a line that started from India, because India is a partner in this. India is part and parcel of the Israeli plan to control the Arab and Muslim world. It goes from India and goes from the Indian Ocean to the Arabian Sea to the Gulf, and from the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan to Haifa, and then to Europe through the Mediterranean. And he called it the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, in which Israel would be calling the shots. Israel will be the hegemon. Israel will be the indispensable central power that will control the activities. That's what we are facing. And if Iran falls, I can tell you there is nothing that's going to stop it. It's going to have free hand everywhere. It will be dictating to everywhere. And Netanyahu says that day in and day out. He says we have a new map of the Middle East. The only forces that have been restraining Israel from dictating to the whole region was the so-called acts of resistance, which has taken blows, but it has not surrendered yet. And that gives us, it should, actually to the whole Arab and Muslim world, particularly the people. It should give them the warning that if you do not wake up and resist Zionist influence and foreign hegemony, what happened to Gaza could be the future of every single city if you do not agree to their dictates and their plans.
Sheikh, I think that was beautifully put, that a lot of people in Pakistan recently have been trying. We've had a very pathetic push from some Zionist lobbies. It was very fake. Some of them showed up on TV and they tried to suggest that this is an Arab problem and why do we need to keep our enmity with Israel and so on and so forth. But the bigger picture is that Israel wants to control the region. It wants to use India. It wants to use the UAE. Like with the Phoenicians, it wants to make a colony of a colony. As it is a pseudo sort of American colony, it also wants to make sub-colonies, like with the Druze, like with the UAE, like with India. It wants to control these regional allies, use them to control the whole region. And Pakistan, which has a lot of military capability and a lot of geostrategic importance and value, and its ally China is also being threatened. But this greater geostrategic sort of importance of the threat of Israel is not being recognized by the leadership of today. You think that it's time to face the problem head on, and a lot of people are still wanting to stick their head in the sand, avoid it, don't look at it. But it's reaching every single Muslim country's borders. The problem is reaching, very quickly. No country is protected from it anymore, honestly. In closing, what do you think is the outcome for Iran? Do you think that Iran will be able to sustain this fight? Do you think the Israeli aggression and American aggression will restart? And if so, if you could have a rough timeline of what you think is going to look like.
I think we are witnessing now a change in the world order, international order. It's going to be slow, it's going to be difficult, but it's coming. We're seeing now the emergence of another world led by China, Russia, and the BRICS. And I think they want to see a different international order, unlike the American-led order that is willing to sacrifice all the international institutions in order to placate, in order to please the Zionists. And this order cannot rule the day. They think that they are at the end of their crusade, and they consider this as a crusade in which Israel could become the hegemon in the region if it can defeat Iran. And to defeat Iran, they want either, number one, to have regime change, which they found in a very difficult way is very difficult, if not impossible, or try to contain it and defeat it. And this is the phase we're in. What we're seeing today is that Netanyahu and Trump are trying to conspire and see how they can defeat Iran. Trump is not interested in forever wars. Israel is. So whether Israel would be able to convince Trump to go and have another round with Iran, hoping that it can decapitate the regime by killing its most senior leaders and try to get it to surrender, I think is a tall order, and they find it very difficult to achieve. Iran is very smart in trying not to wage war, but if their back is to the wall, I think they will be able to defend themselves. They have seen the fortitude and they have seen the strength and power that they are capable of inflicting major blows on Israeli society. And I think that would be something that the Israelis would have to think twice about. That's why they're not interested in engaging Iran alone. They want the power of the United States to be with them in order to inflict heavy losses on Iran. I think the problem is really here is the Arab and Muslims throughout. I think we have seen for the past 21 months that we lack in vision, and we lack in understanding, and we lack in sacrifices, and we lack on the spirit of change. And I think that's due to the elites who are trying to have it both ways. They want, on one hand, to talk about change and renaissance and all kinds of things, Islamic society and Islamic state and economic prosperity and scientific advancement, but they don't want to face the elephant in the room, which you can't do any of these. You can't have a Renaissance project. You can't have a unity project. You cannot have an integration project within the Muslim countries. You can't have advancement in science and economic prosperity without dealing with the threat at hand. And the threat at hand is that this has to be under the control and hegemony of America and Israel. And unless you deal with this, unless you put this threat and challenge at the forefront of your struggle, you're going to lose. You're going to fail. And if there is a lesson to be learned about the so-called Arab Spring, is that Israel will look at all these attempts at unity, at change, at democracy, at prosperity as being challenges and as being threats to its presence and existence, and therefore it will take a very strong stand against them. Israel learned from Tufan al-Aqsa, from the October 7 attack, that it cannot just rely on the intentions of the ruling elites. It has to look at the capabilities of the countries, because these changes can take place in no time. That's why it went after Syrian capabilities once the regime was changed. And now it's going to go after every country's capabilities, regardless of who's in charge. So it's going to go after Egypt, after Saudi Arabia, after Pakistan, after Indonesia, every one of these countries. If it has any kind of capabilities that could actually endanger the Zionist state, it's going to go after it. The same it's doing now with Iran. And that puts that challenge right at the center of our struggle. If you ignore it, it will not ignore you. If you try to avoid it, it will not avoid you. It will come after you, and it will do every single possible trick in the book. It will try to destroy, to wreck your societies. It will try to partition your societies. If you have an insurrection in Pakistan, it will go and fuel it. If you have one in Syria, it will go and fuel it. If you have one in Iraq, it will go and do it. If you have...
It's already started. The Baloch nationalist movement, they've been picked
Absolutely.
up. They've already been picked up, and memory. They've been given positions on memory, and it's just hilarious.
You can see it.
Yeah, you had this, this character Tommy Robinson, the England guy. He doesn't even know where Balochistan is. He was tweeting "Free Balochistan,"
Yes. Therefore, you can see Libya is turning into two. They want to turn the whole region into failed states. Libya is 2, Sudan is 2. They want to make it 3. They want to make Syria 4. They want to wreck Lebanon. They want to wreck Iran, wreck Pakistan, wreck Saudi Arabia, wreck Egypt. That's what this.
Sheikh, I always ask people coming from Saudi, are the Saudis, forget the UAE, forget Bahrain, forget Kuwait, they're not real. Saudi is a real country in terms of land mass and infrastructure and what have you. Is the Saudi national security apparatus asleep at the wheel? Don't they see what a nightmare Israel is going to be, and why do they keep allying with it? It's going to eventually, if even at the last, is it just delaying the inevitable? Because even if it's the last thing on the menu, even if Saudi Arabia is dessert, it's still on the menu. Do they have delusions about that they are somehow protected from Israel?
I certainly hope that they will wake up and see what's happening around them, that they are as targeted as any other country, that if they put their money and their wealth in the hands of the others, that they will just take it and that they will end up empty-handed. If you're going to build an industrial base and pay trillions of dollars, that this could actually be a threat to you, because they will always threaten you to come and destroy it so that they can control your freedom of action. Israel as threatening to the Saudis and to the ruling elites in Saudi Arabia as any other country, and therefore they will find out, if not already, soon, that they will have two choices: either to be under the thumb of the Israelis and the Americans, or they would have to face the challenge and become truly independent and reject the Israeli dictates and the American hegemony, and they would have to start their struggle for true independence and liberation.
Right. The problem is at our doors. We can't avoid it any longer. Sheikh, thank you so much for your time. And I think this is the lesson for today, for everybody in Pakistan, for anyone who's watching. that the Israeli problem, the Western imperialist project, even if it is in a paradigm shift, even if the global order is shifting, its last, one of its last hurrahs is to destabilize the whole Muslim region and to create chaos from Jakarta to Mali, all the way. And we hope and pray that our leadership has the good sense, and if they don't have the good sense to act, that they are replaced by people who have the good sense to act. Like it was very shocking, but during the after the bombing by the Americans, some defense professor, some international relations professor in Tel Aviv started tweeting that now we have to consider Pakistan's nuclear options as well. And there has been a historical attempt by Israel via India to bomb our young nuclear program back in the 80s, and we had civil air defense against it for years. We had to protect the morning flights that were coming in from London, the British Airways flights, because the expectation was that they would hide under the wings to avoid radar detection, and then they would refuel in Gujarat in India. We've had so many diplomatic scares with them, direct confrontations with them, and there is almost an aloofness in Pakistan now with regards to Israel, and especially from the left, surprisingly. In Pakistan, they're acting as fifth columnists and trying to show that, we need to let go of this savagery and we need to make deals with Israel and sort of negotiate and technology exchange and all this BS. But thank you, Sheikh. Thank you for your time. And inshallah, hopefully, the message is loud and clear. There is an awakening happening in Pakistan. People are waking up. The war has reached their border in Iran. And hopefully, this is a sign for this damage that's been done to the Axis, is a sign for the rest of the Muslim world to wake up and not let it fall. Because if it falls, if the regime, for example, in Iran collapses, then Pakistan is not safe. Our Afghanistan is not safe. So even if for cynical self-interest, Muslim countries have to realize that Israel is a menace, till the bitter end. Thank you, Sheikh. We'll see you soon, hopefully, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.